Hi guys, thanks for the waiting. Well, this is part 8 of What If Kamen Rider Para DX was in RWBY. So let's start. Chapter 13, Truth Be Told. First person POV dash. That's a bit odd for a pair of names. I heard Fox say as I continued to examine the weapons, though individually this time around. I had set the blue-trimmed one, Plague, onto the workshop table before turning my attention to its brother Pestilence, the red-trimmed one, and answered, "It may be odd to you, but to me the names are symbolic." I was getting an odd sense of imperfection, like it wasn't quite complete yet. Symbolic of what, Dichro? I heard Velvet ask curiously. As I continued to muddle on my thoughts, I merely replied, symbolic that even the darkest of instruments can be used for good. For some reason, don't ask me how or why, I thought about guitars, which lead me to guitar strings, which made me think of the strings on Penny's weapons. That's when the idea came. "That's it!" I shouted out. Evidently, I must have caught everyone by surprise because I heard Velvet yelp before I turned around and saw her nursing her ears. With a nervous chuckle, I apologized to the Bun for being too loud before Glinda asked me what I was on about. "My weapons," I began, "even now, they feel incomplete, but I know how to finish them off. I just need to contact Blake first and dash." Before I could finish that sentence, I saw John running up to us in his Viking uniform shouting, "Hey!" As he reached us, he leaned forward with his hands holding himself up on his knees as he panted heavily and said, "Sorry for being so late. Hey, I feel like I'm gonna die." "You okay there, buddy? You look like you ran all the way here from Bakuo?" I asked him in genuine concern. "Not quite, but it definitely feels like it," he said as his breathing finally became controlled. "I slept late. Didn't have breakfast. Missed the appointment I had set up so you could help me with my shield. Ran all the way here dash." Glinda interrupted his ramblings saying, "Mr. Ark, you must realize that the schedules set up for the armory are nowhere near as strict as appointments set up for the infirmary, do you? And besides, the armory time slots are on a first-come, first-served basis, meaning if no one else arrives before you then you can take as long as you need so long as there are spaces available. Sorry, I just have a bad habit of keeping up with schedules," the poor guy said, rubbing the back of his head nervously. "Regimented upbringing?" I asked in a deadpan voice. Kind of. I mostly have my sisters to blame for that," the blonde knight said with a shrug before noticing Pestilence in my hand and pointing at it. "That your new weapon? Nice. Weapons, John." I corrected him as I picked up Plague and held them aloft. "I'm a dual wielder, like Run." "Oh. Cool," he simply said. I chuckled before setting them down and pulled out my scroll as I asked, "Now does anyone have Blake's contact information, and if so, how the hell do I put it in here?" Yeah, I have to be honest. I was never any good with smartphones, that was my baby sister's territory. John filled me in on how numbers, or codes as they're called here, worked and typed up the code for Blake's scroll before showing me how to find mine. Thanking him, I hit what looked like the dial button and saw the call was getting through. "Hello? Who is this?" Blake's voice called out from the speakers, I guess of the scroll. In reply, I simply said, "Yo, Kit Kat. Dichro, don't ever call me that again, okay?" I chuckled as she asked me of this and simply obliged by saying, "Sure thing, Blake. By the way, your weapon. More specifically the ribbon you have on it. Do you have any more of it?" She must not have expected that because it took a few seconds for her reply to come in. And boy did I regret asking it. "Why? Did you want to experiment with Yang sometime?" she asked, sounding almost dead serious and no shame in her voice at all. With a groan, I rubbed my eyes with my left index and thumb before I replied sarcastically, "Yes, Blake, I want to totally dress up as a gothic girl and complain non-stop about how life is miserable." "Sheesh, I was only joking," she said, laughing a little. "Ha, joke's on you," I retorted with a smirk, "but you are partially right. I want to see if having that kind of ribbon on my weapons would work. Basically, I'm kinda copying you." I don't see it that way since you said weapons. Just be lucky Ruby isn't here right now, she started to say before I heard the sound of the bed springs groaning as if Blake were getting out of her bed. I'll see what I can find, and if not, I'll try to get Weiss to get 1 or 2 for you. Much appreciated, thanks. With that, I hung up, or at least I think I did, and closed the scroll up before turning to John and saying, now then. I think I have an idea for you. Is it anything that requires like long-range accuracy or anything like that? John interrupted. I sighed and simply told him no before resuming my suggestion. What I'm thinking of is a front-line way for you to use your greatest skill and weapon to your advantage, I said, circling him while holding my chin as I pretended to think on it, though in all honesty I already knew what to suggest to John. My good looks and my sword? John, you're an idiot sometimes. Cunning and scary as hell, but still an idiot. No, your brain, you numbskull. I exclaimed as I wrapped my hand against my temple before holding my head in pain. Damn, that ant's strength is going to get me killed one day. Poor Velvet was giggling up a storm, but I continued with my exposition, ignoring her almost outright. What I mean is we need to give your shield a weapons upgrade that will take advantage of that mind of yours and multiply it by 100 before unleashing it on your enemies. And really, only one weapon is on the top of my head when I think about it. Yatsa spoke up asking, what kind of weapon would that be? I turned to the giant student, smirked at him, and said one single word. Mines. Good, which eyed me with an incredulous look before asking, why mines, Mr. Spectrum? Simple really, I started to explain as I shrugged my shoulders. Mines are viewed as a smart man's weapon, a hunter's trap for his prey, so to speak. John wouldn't have to do much save or consider where to place them, and then when the time is right. I held my right fist up with my thumb pointed up before bringing it down over the side of my index finger, making a clicking noise with my tongue. Boom, pop goes the weasel. John glanced at me like I was some kind of shady dealer as he asked, do you really think I can pull it off? Totally. You've got the brains for it, big guy, you just need the confidence, I said before leading him over to where I had made my weapons. If you want, you can preserve your heirloom by making a brand new shield, and a new sword if you really wanted to. Yeah, let's just stick with a new shield, John said nervously as he looked over his options. A few hours later dash. Call me crazy, but getting John's new shield was a lot harder to deal with than me getting my weapons. Turns out that mines are actually a rare commodity here, which complicates things. They aren't expensive, mind you, considering that they use a special blend of gravity dust as a sticking element and a blend of blast and energy dust as the most common ammunition, and the actual triggering mechanism was actually cheap as dirt too, just a simple little spark emitter from what Goodwitch said. But the problem is that there is such a low demand for them that when people finally order them, shops tend to run out very quickly unless ordered directly from the Schnee Dust Company. Talk about cornering the market, am I right? Anyway, that aside, the other issue was actually getting the measurements for the shield itself. Something went wrong with the forging process, and because of that we had to backtrack a few times to find out what went wrong. Turns out that John typed up a wrong code that glitched the system out, but when the staff fixed it we were finally able to make a rather impressive shield, a white kite shield that was curved along the middle, designed with golden rivets along the edges and the symbol from his old shield, the 2 crescents, right smack in the top middle. It was a bit longer than the shield John had, so it couldn't be used as a sheath for his waist, but it was perfect for placing it on his back and carrying it that way. Plus the actual mine launcher itself was tucked away in the very middle of the shield under a hatch. All he had to do was pull the trigger once and it would open the hatch to reveal the launcher, and then pull it again to fire. And to hide it away he just had to hold the trigger down for a second. Yatsu and Velvet suggested the shape and length of the shield respectively, while Fox was the one who suggested he make the shield out of a more lightweight metal than what his old one was so that he could carry it easier. But due to the steel dust infusion he chose, it made the shield that much stronger than his old one. I was actually proud he made that choice on his own. But all good things come to an end. Before long, Coco finally reared her ugly head. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the girl is bad, but she's just one of those people I tend to hate simply because of her "I don't care what you think, you're going to do this because I say" attitude. Or what little I saw of her anyway. As soon as she popped in and Velvet moved to introduce her, I just grabbed Plague and Pestilence and flat out left without a word. Latching the tomahawks to my belt loops, I walked as far as to the courtyard statue when Velvet caught up to me and tried to ask what was wrong. I simply told her that it would be too complicated to explain, but that the short answer was I'm not in the mood to deal with people like her. I didn't even bother waiting for a reaction as I simply walked away towards the dorms, but I didn't get 3 feet before my scroll went off. When I opened it, I saw a message from Ashban saying, "Come see me in my office. We have something important to discuss before we get involved with your training." Hoo boy, that wasn't good news at all. As I turned to face Beacon Tower, a thought hit me. Yang was my soulmate, or bondmate as the staff tended to refer to either of us, and because she's able to sense my feelings, she could no doubt feel my guilt. That made things more difficult to hide the absolute truth from her, so I decided on something I felt had to be done. I typed up a reply saying, "Let me get Yang first. Because she's my bondmate, she has a right to know the truth as well." My reason for doing this was that I wanted her to trust me just as much as I trusted her. I don't want any walls or chasms between us. If I hold out telling her this any longer, then it will just end up with her hating me and feeling betrayed without a cool head to think, and I didn't want to be on the receiving end of one of her beatdowns. I continued walking to the dorms, though at a slower pace, waiting for a reply, and got one when I was just outside the door. "Make it quick, then. You are correct in that due to being your bondmate this concerns her, too." With that, I nodded and went inside the building hunting for Team RWBY's dorm. When I found it, I raised my hand to knock on the door to see if anyone was in there when I heard someone, Yang actually, saying, "Don't bother, nobody's in there right now." I looked over to the owner of the voice and saw Yang smiling at me in that familiar cocky way that she gives to the rest of her friends. I smiled back slightly before saying, "Hey, Yang. You're actually the person I was looking for." I could feel her confusion as I watched her smile vanish as she asked why I was looking for her. "Well, I got a message from Professor Ashban saying that he needed to see us, as in you and I told her nervously. Clearly, she caught on to this and asked, "Does this have anything to do with RWBY?" "What?" I explained before I held my hand up and said, No, nothing to do with RWBY, Blake, Weiss, or even Team JNPR. In fact, it might be better if you avoided telling them about this." This only got her concerned as she raised her eyebrow. I simply sighed and shrugged before I pleaded with her, just trust me on this. Like I trusted you to unlock my aura. Please? That was all she needed to hear, apparently. With that, she nodded and, together, we walked to Beacon Tower. Yang took notice of my weapons but didn't bother asking about them, simply giving me a quick cool axes. As we walked. Normally, I would have made a pun about them and her quote, but even I knew when there was a time and a place, and this was neither of them. We approached the tower and entered to find a pair of guards at the door. That's new, I didn't think they were here 24/7 or something. Telling the guards and secretary the reason for our visit, we were shown to the elevator and allowed to ride it to the top, where Ashban's office was. As we arrived, the elevator doors opened to reveal Ashban was with 2 other occupants, one of which we recognized as Glinda Goodwitch, but the other was a middle-aged man with graying black, spiky hair, red eyes, and slight stubble along his jawline, wearing a gray dress shirt with a long tail, black dress pants, and black dress shoes with a red, tattered cloak and a necklace with a crooked cross-shaped pendant to complete the ensemble. Looking at his hands, I also noticed he was wearing a ring on his right index finger with 2 other rings on his right fourth finger. Looks like 3 out of 4 of Ashban's group now knew about me if Crow was here. But as the doors opened, it sounded like we caught them in the middle of a conversation. And trust me when I say that this young man is far from ordinary. You have not only my word on the matter, but you also have Glinda's word as well, since she and several others were witnesses to his feats, were the ending words of Ashban's statement that we caught. And I'm telling you, Ashban, that I do not train pipsqueaks unless either they go to Signal Academy or their names are Yang Xiaolong or Ruby Rose, Crow retorted. You may wish to ask her yourself, then, as she fought Daikro firsthand, Glinda said, motioning to us. Crow looked in our direction with what I guess was his version of caution as we walked out of the elevator. Hey, Uncle Crow. Yang greeted cheerfully as she waved at him. What are you doing here? I should be asking you that, Firecracker, Crow retorted rather lazily, before Ashban spoke up. She came at the request of me due to certain circumstances. Crow glared at the man as if he were trying to burn holes into the headmaster's eyes as he asked, what circumstances? She and Crow are bondmates, Ashbin said curtly and briefly. The look on Crow's face when he initially heard this was one of surprise before it relaxed with a small smile appearing before he said, so she unlocked his aura, eh? Let me guess, she has a red bond or a green bond with him? Actually, Crow, Glinda interrupted, it's a golden bond. Crow's disbelief and surprise returned as he turned to Glinda before looking at me and then at Yang. Sorry, Out of all the people I expected to get one, Yang was definitely not on the list. He spoke in a rather slow, for him, way. Almost like he was still processing that info. Yang, however, wasn't as slow on the uptake as her uncle was when she spoke up, aggravated at his words, HUI. What's that supposed to mean? The old man did this weird cross between a cringe and a shrug as he answered, sorry, firecracker, it's just... You aren't exactly the type to be pinned down. And it's because of this unexpected turn of events that she has to know as well, Ashbin spoke up. Crow turned on the headmaster with a glare, but Yang spoke up before he could retort, know what? What's going on? Looks like now's the time for me to face the music. Yang. Do you remember when I said that I'm from outside the Four Kingdoms? I asked her without so much as looking at her. I couldn't tell what she did, but I could hear and feel the confusion in her voice as she gave her answer, yeah. Why? I closed my eyes as I inhaled slowly inside before turning to her and looking her straight in those lavender orbs of hers. Well, that was a half-truth. I stated flatly, the whole truth is, I'm not even from Remnant at all. To be continued.